Hey guys, thanks for joining live. We are here with director Jim Gillespie. He did the big hit, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and also the Stallone film Detox, as well as other films. And we also got Sven and Alex from Retro Gold 63. Check out the website, retrogold63.de, to get like some really cool versions of all these great films that we grew up watching. So thanks for joining, guys.
Thanks for having us. It's an honor.
And Jim, just to start off, can we get your story on how you basically made it in Hollywood? Because you ended up directing one of the biggest horror films of all time in the late 90s, which was I Know What You Did Last Summer. But how did you break into Hollywood exactly?
Um, Actually, quite easily and simply. But it wasn't an overnight thing because I'd been directing for almost 10 years before I came here in television in the UK, in my homeland in Scotland to begin with, and then, on the BBC and Channel 4 and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I made a short film called Joyride, which the BFI funded, British Film Institute. It was just 10 minutes, but it was like a Die Hard movie. It was basically the world's smallest Die Hard film. It was going to be Die Hard in the trunk of a car. And basically it's about a sort of electricity worker who finds himself kidnapped by these killers and put in the back, literally the trunk of his car. And so the whole movie is him trying to escape from the trunk of his car, but it's only 10 minutes long. Mm. But we shot it Panavision, widescreen, so it looked like a movie. And it was picked up by the Telluride Film Festival. And I went there with it and we screened it. And it went down a bomb. Everyone loved it. And I had 3 or 4 people come up to me at Telluride and say, if you're ever going to be in Los Angeles, here's my number. Mm-hmm. So I came back home. I went to get a job directing a feature-length TV film, but I couldn't get it because I wasn't experienced enough. So I took the Hollywood call on its face, and I borrowed some money. I took a little 10-minute film, and I came out to Los Angeles and stayed on, an apartment floor of a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy. Okay. And I just made the 3 numbers that I had. And it got me, 10 minutes is a great thing if you're trying to break into anywhere, because people will give you 10 minutes.
Sure.
It's not like you've got to sit and watch a movie. You've got 10 minutes. You can do that in a cup of coffee. So the film was seen a lot. I got a lot of meetings. I managed to get an agent. And the next thing I know, I'm being hired by Hollywood studios to work on ideas for films that ultimately didn't happen. Mm. I was hired to write an outline for X-Men.
Wow.
Back in like 96. By 20th Century Fox, Lauren Schuler Donner. And Fox hired me to do that. And then I was hired to make my first movie, which was going to be called Big Bugs, which was sort of like Jurassic Park with insects. Mm. And when I was trying to get the script in shape, again, this was for 20th Century Fox, I had a writer who hadn't had a breakthrough at that point, but he was called Kevin Williamson. And he'd written this thing called Scary Movie, which became Scream. And I had pitched for the job because I loved the script and didn't get it. Obviously, it went to Wes Craven. But I made a connection with Kevin through that. And I hired him on to do a rewrite on Big Bugs. The movie didn't happen. It went away. But he had written this thing called I Know What You Did Last Summer. And so he had mentioned my name to the executives at Mandalay and also to the producer Neil Moritz and Eric Feig and Stokely Chaffin, who had developed the project with him. Mm-hmm. And I went in and met on it, pitched, and they gave me the job. And I had a movie.
Huge hit. Wow. So you started off with a bang.
You never know. That's the thing about, I think, any movie. No one really knows what's going to be a huge hit. There's expectation. And Scream hadn't come out. by the time we were greenlit. But then it did, and it was obviously a massive hit. So Kevin was really hot. And the genre, again, where it had been a bit dead, was suddenly revitalized. And so we benefited of coming, as the second sort of modern version of a slasher movie.
Wow. And I remember seeing that in the theater. That was it was good, man. Like, and it was huge. I forget if the marketing, they probably had mentioned that it was the same guy from Scream, I would think, right? Because he was hot at the time.
Yeah, I mean, from the writer of Scream, I'm sure it was on posters at the time. But it was a very different movie from Scream. It didn't have quite the same sort of meta thing. It was a much more traditional sort of thriller story. And I think that the thing that made it a hit more than anything else was that it had 4 really relatable protagonists at the heart of it. And more importantly, it was about something that was really familiar to our target audience. That whole idea of leaving high school, going to college, summer break, and something goes wrong. And what would happen if that derailed your whole life? And that was something I think that everybody could sort of grasp onto.
Oh, for sure. And those protagonists, they ended up becoming really big stars. You had Freddie Prinze Jr., Sarah Michelle Gellar, Jennifer Love Hewitt. I read an interview actually. I want to get your thoughts on this because Freddie Prinze Jr. came out, I think, this year and was talking about how that you didn't really want him in the movie and you wanted a guy named Jeremy Sisto in the film.
This is, all that came out from Freddie, and I think partly because he was launching his own podcast and wanted something to stir up some controversy. And I had so many people try to get me to comment on it, and I refused to do it because at the end of the day, if that's what Freddie believes, that's what Freddie believes. I can't change that.
Sure.
However, it's not true. Almost everything that he said there is a spin on reality. The truth is, and I've said this since the movie was released and during the release, I've fought for Freddie to be in the movie. And the only reason he was in the movie is because I wanted him to be in the movie. So I don't know where he gets the thing about I didn't want him. And Jeremy Sisto, it's kind of a shame that Jeremy's been dragged into this. Jeremy was one of those actors at that time, like Ryan Phillippe, who was a maybe big star. There was a whole raft of those young male actors in Hollywood who had potential to be like the next Brad Pitt. And everyone talks like that when you're casting a movie, like I know we did last summer. And so I had looked really hard for the person to be Ray, the character of Ray, which is ultimately Freddie's character. And he came in, and I really liked him a lot. The studio didn't. The studio just didn't think he was right. He wasn't sort of physical enough for them. In the way that I think we cast Ryan at that point. And Ryan had a great body. He looked fantastic. You could put him in an old sack and he looked like a movie star, And Freddie just looked more like a normal guy. But he had something that I really liked, a sort of real reality to him. So I worked with him through 4 or 5 different auditions and screen tests, to the point where he almost walked away from it because he was sick and tired of having to audition. And of course, I'm not saying to him, "Oh, people don't want you." I'm saying, "Oh no, don't worry about it. We're going to get through this."
Sure,
And
encourage him.
we worked really hard. And we had a screen test, and this is the ridiculous part of the Jeremy Sisto's story. Jeremy's a good actor. and he would have been good in the role, but he was so much more mature than everybody else that I was casting. And I wanted the cast to feel like they were the age. They were like high school, just going into college, not 27-year-old teenagers. And they were. So, Jennifer Love Hewitt was 18, I think, just turned. I think Freddie was the same age. They were really young. And Jeremy Sisto looked 25. And when he spoke, he had a deep baritone voice, and really weighty. We did a screen test, and Jeremy came along to the screen test opposite Freddie for that role. And I did that deliberately because I wanted the studio to go, okay, I get it. When you see everybody together, Jeremy's not part of that ensemble. He doesn't fit as well as Freddie fit. And that's nothing to do with talent. It's just the balance of cast. And that's why Jeremy Sisto even came to be screen tested, because I wanted him to so clearly be not what Freddie was. And having seen that screen test, the studio let me cast Freddie. And that's the truth of it. Now, why Freddie thinks otherwise, I can't answer to that. But that's the actual reality.
Yeah, that's cool. He might just be trying to get a lot of attention and controversy for his podcast. One thing, one last thing I'll say, because I read it in the article, that he said that you left him psychotic notes, with one of them saying, "Don't leave your mouth open, as you look stupid when you do that," which is what my mom tells me, by the way.
No, right. You see, again, and this is, it's quite funny because the way it's reported, and the way it was reported here in the UK, was if people don't know what a director does, a director gives actors notes. Now, that means that I, on the set, speak to them. That's a note, right? So if you do a take and I come to you and I say, it's a bit much, pull it back, do this here a bit more, that's a note. It's not, I write you a note. And that's how it came across. People thought I was writing him a note. And the way Freddie, of course, sold it was a psychotic note. And they all had this image of me writing like strange notes and slipping it under his like trailer door or something. And the truth is, I did tell him to keep his mouth closed. I don't think I ever said because he looks stupid. That's just not my word, and it wouldn't be the reason for asking him to do that. If you watch the movie, there are plenty of times where Freddie is standing with his mouth slightly open. And for any actor, I would say the note's a good note. Don't stand with your mouth open.
Yeah.
There are plenty of times when that's fine. But in the final sequence of the film, where he's being the hero and coming to rescue Jennifer Love Hewitt, he had to be like the hero. And I didn't want him to be standing there looking a little bit like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I did 100% say to him, and in fact, I would be off camera sometimes and I go, now, if he thinks that's psychotic, fair enough. Let's say I'm not getting into a discussion or argument with Freddie, but the note was a good note for the film.
Oh, for sure. He's probably just sensitive. Like, I had recently shot a film called Bloodstorm with Rene Perez, and he gave me a bunch of notes, and I'm not like a sensitive guy, he's like, "Oh, well, don't do it like that. It doesn't look right, or it looks dumb." It's like, okay, well, I want to look cool and I want to look good in the film, so tell me what to do. So I like these notes, because I don't get offended. But
that's the job.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you got to trust the director, because the director wants to look good, so he's going to make sure the actors look good, of course.
Look, and the thing is, at the end of the day, so none of it matters because Freddie's good in the film, and the film worked, and Freddie went on and had, a successful career.
Oh, definitely.
Until he decided to sort of pull back from it a bit. So I have no, like qualms about having given it a no.
Now, after the huge success of I Know What You Did Last Summer, so what happened to you? I think they tried to get you for the sequel, but you didn't really want to do it because there was like not enough time, or is that the right story?
No, well, I mean, in part, I mean, I was approached to do the sequel very soon after the movie was released. It was a huge hit, not just in the US. It traveled everywhere and made a lot of money for everybody. And so they wanted to do the sequel. And they came to me and they offered me a ridiculous sum of money to do it. I said, yes, please. That sounds like a good idea. But then they wanted me to commit to releasing the movie on the same weekend the following year. Now, we didn't have a script. We really didn't have a story. And the 2 or 3 pages that they sent me after me saying, I'd absolutely love to do it, the 2 or 3 pages that they had, I just didn't think worked as a film and a story. And I was really concerned that we'd go down the road trying to develop a screenplay, which they don't always come together immediately. I'm sure you've had many people, through this YouTube channel talking to you about scripts, and you've probably done it yourself. They can take years to develop to get to where they need to be good. And I know what you did last summer didn't happen in 4 months, 5 months. And that's what it needed to do. So at the end of the day, I kind of decided that wasn't going to work for me. I didn't want to make a film that was worse than the original. And I didn't have a strong enough take on what the sequel could be to argue against the 2 or 3 pages that were there. So I sort of decided to pull back and out of it. And they went off and they made the movie. And I don't think I was wrong, to be honest. I don't think the second film really works. I just didn't like what they did with the fishermen and the whole story. It could have been a much better film and a much stronger franchise, and I think it kind of ended with the second one. I know they did a third film, sort of unrelated, then a TV series, which just didn't work for me. So I wish they'd taken a bit more time and developed a really strong sequel, and I would happily have made it. I loved the cast. I loved the crew that I worked with. But those things happen that way sometimes.
One last question related to that franchise, because there's been talks about rebooting a movie. Are you involved in that at all?
No, not at all. And the funny thing is, I had an idea of how to reboot that series. And I was going to go and speak to Neil Moritz about it and say, this might sound strange, but I think there's a way to reboot this using one member of the original cast. I mean, 2 of them are dead anyway in the movie. So you only had Love and Freddie. And the character I wanted to base it on was Freddie. And then it came out that Freddie was like, oh no, that guy's an asshole. I would never watch him again. So anyway, but no, I've got nothing to do with whatever sequel will be. But I had a good idea for what it might be.
Okay. Well, let's move on to Detox. Also, I guess it was released in the US as ICU. How did you get involved in that project?
Well, it's slightly tied in with what was happening with I Know What You Did Last Summer. I had developed a project, or was in the process of developing a project with Imagine, which is Ron Howard and Brian Grazer's company. And when I first came out, one of the people who helped bring me to Hollywood was an executive called Maureen Payroll, who worked for Imagine. And so I met with them very early before I made I Know What You Did Last Summer. And I pitched several ideas, and they really liked one of them. It would have been a science fiction movie, a space movie called Deep Space. And they loved it. The pitch was sort of Das Boot in space. And they went, that's it. Don't say another word. We get it. And so I was developing that project with them. Then I Know What You Did Last Summer happened. I went off and made that film. And when it was released, they came back and said, we want to make your next film. And I was like, that's great. We Dead Space, we'll dig into it. And they said, no, you don't understand. We want to make your next film, not the one after you do a sequel. We want to do your next film. So there was a lot of pressure for me to go to work with them. And my agents were also their agents. So there was sort of that happening at the same time. And so I was sort of talked out a little bit of the Last Summer sequel at the same time as the script not being right was happening. So it made it easier for me to go, I'm going to move on to something else and leave the Last Summer sequel and go to work on what became Detox. There was someone who worked there called Ron Brinkerhoff. He was like a creative executive at Imagine. A really nice guy who I'd met when I was there developing Dead Space. And he had written a spec script called Detox. And he gave it to me to read. And I just thought there was something in it that was really good. And because of that, it got some momentum. And Imagine went, right, we're going to make this. We can develop this script, cast it. That's going to be your next film. Okay. And so that's how I sort of got involved. It must be said that script development is a long process, like I said. And it took another year and a bit before we really had the screenplay. But it went through so many different changes to the fact that we lost the whole opening of Detox was something completely different than what ended up in the movie. And it was actually one of the main reasons I wanted to do it. But we lost that whole sequence through the process of the studio and the producers saying, oh, we don't need this bit. But the original idea was that the movie opened with it was like a bank heist hostage situation. And there's some real badass guys in there, and they've taken down a bank and they're holding, like women and children and 3 dogs, whatever. It was a classic scenario. And along comes our hero, the cop, who arrives outside, comes into the bank to talk them down. He'll negotiate. And of course, there's a big shootout and he saves everybody. And he's like super cop. And they all go back. They have a drink in the bar. And he goes home that night. And his door gets kicked in. And it's the killer that becomes the killer of the movie. But what we had was our hero being killed 10 minutes into the movie. So the idea was that we would have cast like, a Bruce Willis or a Mel Gibson of that period that you thought was the hero of the film. But like in Psycho with Janet Leigh, you kill the hero and it makes the king top dog cop easily taken out by this cop killer. And then the movie starts and you're trying to track down this killer who clearly is really capable. But it was really well written. And I loved that opening. And then we lost that.
And then they cut it. Yeah, interesting. When did Sylvester Stallone get involved?
Sly became involved, deep into the process. I mean, I'd sort of given up on us getting the movie made. The script was finished we'd gone out to cast. And to be honest, Sly's name had come up and I passed on him because I know a lot of people that work with him, and there was a lot of kind of not great stories about him being a bit of a control freak, and it's very difficult if you're a director because he would take over. Sly writes, he directs, he acts. He's very talented at all of that. So I had gone, nah, I'm not going to do that. But we could get the right level of actor to commit to the film, in that A-list sort of.
Who did you want then if you passed on Sly? Like, who was your guy?
Those lists are like, you have the top 10 guys and it's a studio list. So it's like, I can't even remember who we had on it, but it was everybody, really.
Like Mel Gibson, Bruce Willis, those guys?
Yeah.
Wow.
Tom Cruise to Mel Gibson to whoever. So you work your way through who's available. Mm-hmm. When can we make the movie? Do we have enough money to pay them for a start? Because you're right into that $20 million range at that point for those actors, certainly then. And we didn't get traction quickly. But the script had taken over a year at that point, 18 months, I think.
Wow.
So I was getting to the point where I just want to go and make a film. I don't want to be hanging on forever on this. And so I got a phone call in London. I'd come back to London to live. And I got a phone call to say, I've got good news and bad news. And I went, okay, give me the good news. We've greenlit Detox. It's definitely happening.
Nice.
I was like, yes. What's the bad news then? Sylvester Stallone is playing Jake Malloy. In or out, that's your choice. We're making the movie. If you want to make it, we want you to make it. If you don't want to make it, nice. Both. See you later. So I thought, oh, man, let's meet. And Sly was actually flying through London at that point. And so I went to meet him, I think the next week. And I met him at the Dorchester Hotel. And we sat and we had coffee and we chatted about the script. And he was very open about, look, people are going to tell you I'm a control freak and all that. I'm not like that. That's just the Hollywood stuff. And the truth is, everybody has a reputation. Mm-hmm. People who you get told are difficult might be, but they equally might not be. And they might not be difficult with you. There's a lot of egos when you make a movie, and particularly at a high-end sort of Hollywood end. And so we sat for a couple of hours and talked and chatted. And I think I've got a pretty good sort of, radar for all that. And it did not ping at all. And I thought, actually, I like this guy. I definitely think we can work together. He seemed really down to earth. And I went, yeah, I'm in. And so that's the process of how we actually came to make the movie together at that stage.
Nice. Now, when you did work on the film together, what was he, a control freak or like?
No.
Oh, he wasn't. Okay.
No. I have to say, now in post-production, it became a slightly different thing. And I had been warned that potential was there anyway. But through the shoot, I have to be honest and say, Sly was a hard-working, straight-up member of an ensemble. He acted his socks off. He committed 110% to the role. He followed direction. Now, I'm not saying that's not always easy to get there, because Sly's a movie star, a huge movie star. Sure. He's one of the icons of cinema, historically, will be. So, of course, he's not like you or I. He's not like a normal human. He's a movie star.
Yeah.
You always have to remember that. And so you have to handle people who are surrounded by a team who enable their lives all the time, who very rarely ever say no. And that's a very difficult place to be, I think.
Mm.
But at the heart of it, Sly just wanted to act in the movie. And there were 2 or 3 days where he was Sylvester Stallone. And those days were more difficult than normal because he came in for whatever reason and felt like he had to be a bit weighty. I don't want to do that. I want to do this. And you would have to find a way to talk around that. But I found working with Sly that if you spoke to him like an equal and had a good argument for your point of view, if there was a disagreement, 9 times out of 10, Sly would go, okay, I get it. I hear it. Let's do it your way. And would. So throughout the whole shoot, we shot 89 days on that
Wow.
movie. I would say there's 1 day out of 89 that was a difficult day with him on set. The other 88, he was great. And I think he took direction really well. He came prepared. He worked really well with the rest of the cast. I thought I had a great cast in that
Oh
film.
yeah, great cast in that one.
And they all worked together as an ensemble. And I think ultimately he gave one of the best performances he's ever given in film. And I think in the director's cut of the film, where it's got time to breathe and be the performance that I got out of him, I think people who watch that cut will recognize it. I think he's terrific in the film.
Definitely. Now, were you prior to directing him, were you like a big Stallone fan or were you more like indifferent?
No, well, I mean, I think it would be. I think anybody would be a liar if they said they weren't a Stallone fan, because how can you not like Rocky?
Oh, Rocky, Rambo. I mean, yeah.
No,
How could you not like those?
Rocky's, he's like an icon of cinema as a character. It's a brilliant film. It won Best Picture for good reason.
Mhm.
That film traveled the whole world, and people like him in the film. He's a vulnerable, interesting guy in the film. So of course I liked him because
Mhm.
Rocky is a brilliant film. It really is. I liked others of his films, but things like Cobra, I couldn't go really. He went through a period making movies that I think he just took the money when the action thing was at its height. When I think maybe his own talent as an actor was always, I think, underestimated. And I think he could have chosen better. But who am I to say? The guy made massive hits. He created and ran now 3 huge franchises. No one else has done that, to be fair. So whether I liked every movie he made or not, but is immaterial. And I think Sly would say, I don't like every movie I made. In
Mm.
fact, I know
Yeah.
he would.
Yeah, he would say that, "Stop or my mom will shoot," for example,
Well,
in Rocky
yeah.
5, he
Oh,
also
boy.
speaks negatively of. When you mentioned Cobra, it's funny because there is some similarity in a way with ICU, him being a cop dealing with, a serial killer, having that horror element tied in, but, he wasn't really happy, I guess, with the final cut of Cobra, because and I always wanted to see, like, the director's cut of that. Hey, here's a question from someone in the audience, by the way, Turbo Terminator. He said, "Can I ask if it has not already been answered by why the movie has different names such as Detox and ICU?"
Well, because Sly wanted to change the title at the end of the day. In truth, the title Detox was one that the studio were never really sold on. And in fact, I think the first time we previewed the movie, we previewed it under the title The Outpost, which I hated.
Okay.
They called it Outpost. I remember going through a list of like 50 names, White Out. It went on forever, never, ever. And Detox to me just stuck. I mean, through the same process on I Know What You Did Last Summer, the studio were like, it's too much. And we were going, yeah, but it's a novel that the audience, actually, a lot of them have read. You can't just change the title. And it meant something. And Detox to me had grown to have a certain resonance about it. But anyway, Sly didn't like it. So it's called D-Tox because Sly wanted to call it D-Tox because he thought Detox was like, I don't know, weak or too old-fashioned. He thought it'd be more hip if it was D-Tox. And I was like, we're not calling it D-Tox. It's Detox. And he even had caps made. I've still got one somewhere that said D-Tox on them. And he gave them out to the crew. So he was really working that behind the scenes to get that name. But why it became ICU in America, I'm not fully sure myself because I'd walked away from it at that point. So it changed its title ultimately to ICU when I wasn't there.
Okay, so after the film, I guess, was initially shot, I heard it didn't test well, with the test audiences. So they ended up, recutting, re-editing. Like, what were your feelings after the initial cut?
Well, but you see, you have to understand the process of making a film because every film is recut. That's what happens. You make the film. There's that old saying: you make the film 3 times: once in the writing, once in the shooting, once in post-production. The truth is, you usually make it slightly more than that because it will be once in the writing, once in the development, twice in the development, then the shoot, then the edit, then another edit, then another edit, and it sort of goes like that. And the testing system process is important, but it can really damage a film too. Because if you get too hung up in the numbers, things start to drive why the film gets cut instead of what really works is if you screen a film to an audience and with a test audience and you're in the room, if the film plays or not. You feel it. The audience reacts or they don't react. People leave. All of that is happening. So films are always recut. Your first preview for a director is a nightmare because you really don't know what an audience is going to think, and neither does the studio. And they always get to a place when you preview the film where everyone's happy, but they're all doing that. And then it screens, and if it doesn't play, it doesn't play, and you have to deal with it. And that's what happened when we screened Detox. It didn't play, and it tested soft. Now, there's many reasons why, in truth, when we tested the film, the movie did test soft. And some of those were things the studio were expecting. They weren't expecting it to be, a huge high testing score. One, because of the genre. It's a dark, violent thriller. And it has a bleak ending. It's bittersweet. It's not the end of 7, but it's a bit of a downer. It doesn't have a triumphant ending. Jake Malloy defeats the killer, but all those deaths have still happened. His fiancée was still murdered. He's not going home singing and dancing. It's like he's managed to deal with the killer, but his whole life has still been wrecked by this guy. So it was never a feel-good movie. And that always has a big effect on how a movie tests anyway. But we also had, right at that time, Hollywood was under a huge spotlight. The Columbine high school massacres had happened 4 months before that.
Hmm.
And so the nation were really focused on why did that happen? And was Hollywood partly responsible for that? And even, I think President Clinton had come out like the month before or so saying, Hollywood, you have to do something about this violence that you perpetrate on people. So there was a whole feeling about that. And the truth is, when we got the preview cards back, a lot of them had comments about, this is disgusting, it's too violent, why are we making films like this? So the timing was definitely off. I didn't think the film was overtly violent, to be honest. Other people, I'm sure, will disagree. But we had that as well. Plus, we had Sly, who was in a bit of a dip in his career.
Yeah, he was at that time. All those guys, unfortunately, were. Yeah.
And now, I thought he is great in the film. But the audience, they just didn't respond to him. Plus, there's a thing about, I think, actors like Sly, where it's a little bit, if you ask people, do you read the National Enquirer? And most people say, no, I don't read the National Enquirer. I'm the New York Times. And they always talk up rather than go for the sort of thing that the guilty pleasure. And Sly, for a lot of people, is a guilty pleasure. So when you put a piece of paper in front of them, they say, how much do you like this guy? They tend to pull back a little. And the studio told me this as well. So they weren't expecting him to test through the roof. So all of those things were part of it when we previewed. But the truth is, the movie was soft. It didn't work. I can't, turn a blind eye to that. I made the movie. The movie's based on the script, and it just didn't work as a film. All the scenes worked. They're all good. The actors are all good. But as a whole thing, it just was soft. And so we had to deal with that. And the immediate thing that you have to confront with these screenings is the first cut I think we screened was 2 hours 20.
Oh, wow.
That length. We screened it, and we knew it was long, and we knew we would trim it back after the preview. But everyone jumps on, it's too long. If you cut it tighter, it'll be much better. So all the notes from the studio and the producers all become focused on just cut it. If it's too long, it's too long. It'll be much better tighter. So we did that. And we tested essentially the same movie, but a tighter version. It scored worse on the second preview. It scored worse. And everybody now is going, oh man, what did we do? The it doesn't work. So I went off and thought about it. And to me, one of the big problems we had was it was just a really linear story. It went beginning, middle, end. Sly is going to win. You just do. If he's in the film, if any movie stars in the film, to be honest, they're not going to die at the end of the film. And I had this conversation with Sly about it, because at one point before we shot, I was going, I want to kill Jake Molloy. I went, good luck with that. It's never going to happen. They will never allow it. But by all means, he said, go with it. And I'll say I'm willing to do that. And so we did, and we wrote a version of an ending. And the studio were like, no, there's no way that Sly can die. There's no way that evil can triumph. And I was like, no, but evil won't triumph. He'll win because he'll kill the killer, but he'll die in the process of saving everybody else. Anyway, that was blown out the water.
Okay.
But I had the idea that the only way to change it was to change the structure of the film. And I'd started to do that with the editors at that point. And then the studio decided to bring another editor in, Salt. They were going, what's wrong with this film? Why is it not testing better than it is? And they all recognized that Sly was good at it because he was.
Sure.
But the film wasn't doing it. So they brought a guy in called Dennis Virkler. Dennis Virkler famously was one of the editors of The Fugitive. And in fact, my understanding is he is the one who chopped The Fugitive up so that it's told in a sort of non-linear fashion, because they had the same problem. So Dennis came in, and the first thing he did, which surprised me, was he said, I don't want to see the film. I want to read the script. He went, okay. So we gave him the script. Then he said, I want to see the film, and I want to see the first assembly that the editors and I had put together. So the longest possible version. And he said, yeah, the problem isn't the film, the problem is the script. It's too linear. We know what's going to happen. It's just laying itself out. And he said, my recommendation is that you find a way to make it non-linear. And I said, well, it's funny you've mentioned that because I have an idea for that. And he went, that's what you have to do. And so he left the process. The studio got on board with the idea, and I worked with the editors, and we recut the film and put it into a non-linear structure, which is what the director's cut is.
Okay.
And the numbers jumped like more than 20 points.
Wow.
Went up 25 points. And suddenly the movie started to work. Now, it still wasn't testing super high, but for all the reasons I've said, dark, nihilistic ending, it tested, I think the best score we had, which was the third preview, was like a 60. Now, you have to remember, Seven, which I regard as a masterpiece, the highest it ever scored were low 60s.
Oh, really? Wow.
And it had Brad Pitt. So I felt comfortable that we had a movie that we could get behind and sell. Now, we hadn't done the music. We still had things that we needed to do to make the film work. The studio were like, great, we've got a direction to go in. We still want it to be tighter yet. So we had to cut more out of it, change a few things. We previewed it again. It went back 5 points.
Oh.
But now at least we're in a place where they went, okay, we're going to stop this process. We go back to the previous cut, but change a few things. We still have things that the audience need to know. We need to know about the motivation of the killer. So we put a title sequence together that had some explanation of that to help along the way. But Sly didn't want to do a flashback version. And at that point, he wanted to do his own cut. And so we kind of were stuck because I wanted to do some reshoots, which the studio were up for doing, to make the film better. And Sly was, I'm not doing it. So I was told. I didn't speak to him directly at that point. But he also had gone off to make Get Carter.
Oh, yeah.
He grew a big goatee beard, which kind of put the kibosh on us doing any reshoots at that point anyway.
Sure.
And he wanted his cut. And so he came in, he took one of the editors, and he sat in the next cutting room to me. And whilst I completed the work on the cut that we had, he was cutting his version in the next cutting room.
Okay. And then, of course, that's the one that we have all seen, right? Which is about an hour and a half.
Essentially, yes. I mean, it's not quite that because the way it worked was the studio committed to doing the cut, not this longer cut that is going to be on the DVD that's going to be released soon. There's another version that has been released, I think, in the US under the name Director's Cut. And the truth is, it's not the Director's Cut. And this Director's Cut version, the new version that we're doing, is my Director's Cut. The other studio Director's Cut was, in fact, the studio approved cut that would have been released.
Mm.
They had got on board with it. I addressed all their notes. That was a film that was going to be released. John Powell came in and did the music. We scored it. The movie was locked. And I was in the mix. I think I was 3 weeks into pre-dubs when Sly's cut was previewed. And they previewed it. And it scored 15 points lower than the cut we had. And everyone was like, well, there you go. It's fine. We push on with what we've got. And then I got a phone call to say, stop what you're doing. We're going with Sly's cut. And I just couldn't understand that. It made no sense to me.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, let's talk about the real director's cut. First of all, Alex and Sven, let's talk about the Retro Gold 63. And guys, you could go to the website, retrogold63.de, German website. Do you guys have an English version of the website, by the way?
It's an English version? No, unfortunately not.
Okay. And so anybody could buy these films on the website. Do you know if they're region free? Like if I bought a copy, can I play it on my US Blu-ray players?
Region 0, Ländercode?
Level 2.
Well, it's region 2, but you know, with the players that you have today, that's not really an issue.
Not really an issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's get a little history of this company, because you guys put out all these cool, movies. I see the posters in the background, and of course, you're doing this very special, release of Detox. Let's get a little history of the company, though.
Yeah, that's right. So this is the brainchild of Alex and Nita-san, who's in the background, who's hiding in the background.
He's hiding.
And the basic idea was just to honor all these action stars that we grew up with, from the 80s and 90s, Steven Seagal, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Sylvester Stallone, of course, Don the Dragon Wilson, Chuck Norris, you name it. You know them, you love them just as much as we do. And we have a history with Detox already, because there were a lot of people who were asking us about the film because they liked it very much, despite its somewhat damaged reputation. So in September 21 we put out these already.
Okay.
So that was the first release. They're all sold out, by the way. And we're going to release early next year Detox with 3 versions. We got the producer's cut, we got the so-called director's cut, that MVD Pictures put out already, and finally, as the world premiere, the director's cut, Jim's approved director's cut, in English, of course, with optional German subtitles, for the German fans. It's basically for the German speaking market. So it comes out, in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. But if it's not really an issue to get the media books anyway. So
Okay.
Question.
Question.
I have to say, David, when I get involved with the company here, Retro Gold 63, they sent me the 3 versions of Detox that they had already released as a media book, and I was blown away by the quality of it. The actual thing itself is it's almost like getting a Criterion you know.
Oh, really? Okay, really high quality. Yeah.
Oh, it really is, you know. It's an actual booklet inside it. There's lots of details and stuff. It had the Blu-ray and the DVD version of it. The artwork was great. The quality of the sleeve was fantastic. I'd never heard of the company or seen anything that they'd put out. And so I was really intrigued when they said, look, we want to do a sort of ultimate edition, I suppose, of Detox. And they asked about the director's cut, and that's when I said, well, that's not really the director's cut. Yes, I put it together, but it's really the studio approved cut. But there is a director's cut, sort of. It's in bits, and I need to put it back together again. But the quality of it it's straight out of like the DVD or VHS dailies and the Avid cuts. So it's very low resolution compared to, I think, what you'd be expecting. It's not a Blu-ray. I need to be clear about that. So people will see it in a slightly rough and ready version because it was never finished in that version. And you should be prepared for that. But it's very, very watchable.
Yes, that's right. It's like a better work print quality, I might say, and it's very watchable, and it's very dark, and but it fits the mood of the picture, and yeah, and we're just happy to get it out there, for people to see, because we really think, the director's cut, it really, like you said, Jim, the film is allowed to breathe more, and because the producer's cut, it's very, it's very fast. It plays too straight. It's a bit like a B picture, but I think the flashback structure gives it a lot of meaning, gives it some very existential moments, of dread and despair, which you don't really have in the producer's cut, because Stallone gets to the rehab, at somewhere around the 30-minute mark, and then things go from there. But you, in your version, you just take the time to build the tension, to get into all those people, all those great character actors, and it's true. The movie really is allowed to breathe more. And it's a beautiful thing, and I think you can really compare it to Copland, for example, in this regard, which is another great ensemble film. And I think this is just this is very similar. You have Stallone with all these great people, with Chris Christopherson, and there's Tom Berenger, Jeffrey Wright, and Courtney B. Vance, and Robert Patrick.
Charles S. Dutton. Yeah.
It's one of the things I think that was a failing with the shorter version. And even the cut that, the studio were intending to release, the tight version, 90-minute version, I had to cut out so many scenes with those other actors. So Jeffrey Wright was cut back to the bone. Robert Patrick, all these people had much more in the film. Courtney Vance, we lost his whole character, really. And they each had great beats that I think allowed you to care about them. So, you could be more suspicious of them. Might they be the killer? But it also made them much more human for when they became victims. And so putting those scenes back into the flow of the picture, suddenly you just care about the film more because they mean something, whereas they were just window dressing, I think, to some extent. And I'm really pleased about that because I think all of the cast were terrific in the film. Jeffrey Wright's great, Robert Patrick's terrific, but all the bits that made that so, we had lost along the way. And so I'm glad to see it's there and people can see it.
That's very important and a good point, because I always say if you don't care about the character, you don't care what happens to the character, and you're not like emotionally invested into the story. It's very important to actually care about the character and feel like they're real people. Here's a question, Turbo Terminator. He said Chris Christopherson and Robert Patrick alongside Sly were really great casting choices. We had mentioned some other names. So I know you had said that Stallone wasn't your first choice, but how much say did you have with the other casting, with all those other actors? Were they your choices, or was that just who you had to work with?
No. Once Sly was on board, the movie was greenlit. And once you have a greenlit movie, then you have a chance to sit, because until it's actually greenlit and it's happening, all those other actors have got so many offers, and they don't know what's real and what's not real. And so they can commit to a script, they can commit to a director, but if the studio isn't putting the money up, that goes away. So if you've done that enough times, you sort of learn to not get too invested in projects that aren't 100% going to happen. Because when they go away, a little bit of you dies because you want. I know that because I've developed many films that didn't happen, and you make the film in your head, and then it doesn't happen, and you just feel like you've lost part of your life. So getting meetings with all of them was suddenly easier because we were definitely making the movie. I could go and meet with Tom Berenger and sit over a table and talk about the character and the role in the film and get them excited about it and get them to commit. And so we're very lucky in the casting process. I had a great casting director, Mary Vernew, who had also cast I Know What We Did Last Summer for me. She worked with Oliver Stone a lot. So she was really well respected, and she put me in a room with a lot of great people. And we put together, I think, a fantastic ensemble. And they were all great, and they all worked together like an ensemble. And I think Sly really appreciated that, because he had a room full of people that he had a real respect for. Chris Christopherson was like someone he really respected. So it wasn't just Sly and a bunch of A and others. It was people that actually he could spar with a bit in the way that he did in Copland.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was going to make that comparison. Hey, Sven, I forget if you said or not, but is this Ultimate Edition available now, or is it available soon?
No, it's going to be available early next year, around January or February.
Yes, but pre-sale starts on Sunday.
But the pre-sales start on Sunday.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So in the next couple of days. So is it limited edition though?
Yes.
Yes.
How many copies?
Well, it's
333, 111, 163.
So
700.
So around 700.
Oh, that's it. Because I know you had mentioned the other versions of Detox that you put out sold out. So okay, I guess you got to get those pre-sales in ASAP if there's only 700, right, to get that. Wow. Hey, here's a funny comment, by the way. This guy, Eddie Edwards, said, Sven, he said, your partner on the left, when he's talking about Alex, looks like a bad guy at the nightclub. Put him in Jim's next movie. That's funny. Speaking of which, Jim, are you got any movies planned anytime soon that you're going to direct?
There's a film that I've been trying to get made that Rick McCallum, who produced Star Wars movies for George Lucas, is producing for me. We don't have all the money together yet. It's a ghost story. It's called The Haunting of Aveline Jones, and it's based on a kid's book. But the movie itself will be scary, but it's not a horror film. Okay. It's almost like a kind of throwback ghost story. It's set in the UK. I think the script's really strong. But it's very difficult to get anything made just now unless it's, at a high level. So, we'll see where we get with it. We're out trying to raise money now.
Okay. And as far as like your career, of course, we talked about, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and then Detox had horror elements. And I know you did a film called Venom. I think it was like 2006 or something, not the Marvel character, but it was like another horror movie. Were you always interested in horror movies, or did you just kind of fall into that and people just kind of put that label on you of like, oh, he could do horror movies?
Well, yes, is the answer. You know, the second part of that is if you make a hit movie, that's all you see are scripts with
Mhm.
4 teenagers being chased by some creature or some guy with a knife or an axe or a whatever chainsaw. And you see that endlessly. But, you know, Detox didn't work. And because it didn't work, it killed me for years. And the truth is, I was really, I'm not going to say damaged by it, but I was disillusioned by it. I love film. It's like in my soul. It's part of who I am. It's not a job. And when you experience your film being destroyed in many ways, I couldn't watch the movie, the released version of Detox. They sent it to me, and I literally, you know, I threw up when I saw it because it was out there with my name on it, and to me, it was a mess. It didn't look good, hadn't been graded properly. The music was shit. Everything about it just was wrong, and that put me off the whole process for quite a long time. And then I came back. There was a couple of movies that I tried to get made, and we came very close. There's a character called Biggles, which is a sort of British icon, World War II, well, World War One right through to the Cold War. Actually, there's like 100 novels written about this character called Biggles. And we came very close to making that film. I spent 2.5 years on it. We were going to shoot it in Australia. I had all the locations done, blah, blah, blah. And then it fell apart at the last minute for rights reasons. So you go through those processes as well. Like I say, you make the movie in your head and then it doesn't happen. And I commit fully to everything I do.
Yeah.
I'm not someone who goes, yeah, I'll say yes to this. Yeah, I'll say yes to this. I've got to want to do it and do it. And then Venom came along because I just wanted to go and work.
Mm-hmm.
And it was another horror film, and Kevin Williamson was involved as a producer, and he'd written the draft that I was sent. And so I said yes to it, but not because I was a horror fan. I just wanted to go and make something, and I like working with Kevin, so I thought we'd go and do that. And then it became a nightmare as well, because it was the Weinsteins, and you know, their deal fell apart at Disney and the company fell apart, and then they didn't release the movie because there was no money. We just couldn't do the reshoots we were supposed to do. It was a nightmare experience. So 2 back to back like that, I kind of sat out for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a rough business, man. For you hear the stories from actors or directors, and you know, you had with Detox, one of the biggest stars in the world, but it actually hurt you more than helped you because he was just going through that slump. You know, Get Carter was a flop that he shot after Detox. Driven, which I thought was pretty cool with the race car, that was a flop. So he was just on that slump until he came back with Rocky Balboa, you know, and then Rambo.
Absolutely. And, you know, and Sly kind of knew it. That's the way it was going. I felt like he should have sort of accepted it a little bit that he wasn't 35 anymore. And that maybe he should lean a little more into his acting chops, because I think he's got them.
Sure.
Yeah, I really do. You know, Sly's going through his career, people kind of talking him down a bit, monosyllabic guy, all of that. And he's not that. And, you know, and even now, having had him completely destroy my film and cost me many movies that I could and should have made and a lot of money into the bargain, I like the guy. You know, I can't deny that. I had a really good time making the film with him, difficult though it was. The shoot was hell. It was really, we're really up there. If you see the movie, There isn't a visual effects film shot in that film. Everything is real. We created every bit of snow, every storm. We built that place up on the top of a mountain in Canada.
Wow.
And we had 27 feet of snow fell. And it was like, there's a great book. It's called Blood, Sweat and Chrome. Have you read it? About the making of Mad Max,
Oh, I
Thunder
have
Road,
not.
Fury Road. It's a brilliant book. I couldn't recommend it more. But it really tells you how difficult it was to make that movie out in the desert, trying to make it in a baking hot, the actors not getting on. It's a hell story. But I recognize so much of Detox in it because we were filming 12 kilometers off any main road. So we had to have snow plows clearing this 12-kilometer route to our set.
Wow.
And it was snowing all the time. And we had a single track road. At the very beginning of the film, there's a shot of the car that holds Sly and Charles Dutton driving up to the Detox Center.
Mm-hmm.
And they're driving up through a canyon of snow. It's about 15 feet tall on either side of the road. Well, that was our road. And it would collapse in often. So you'd literally be shooting and you needed another lens and the base camp was at the bottom of the hill. And then this road would collapse and you'd have to wait for it to be cleared before you could get a lens so you didn't shoot. So we went over schedule. We created the storms at night at the top of this hill. And we had the biggest wind machines you could buy. We had fantastic special effects guys. I mean, I've got stills of lines of these things, like 5 huge fans blowing a storm,
Wow.
throwing snow into it to make it a blizzard. But when the real wind comes, and if it's blowing in the opposite direction, you've got nothing.
Mm.
Everything is like, it's like the perfect example of impotence. Suddenly all the fans in the world just go, and you've got nothing, and you have to make a decision. Do we wait for the wind to stop, or do we turn around and drive everybody through the set, which is pristine snow, as far as the eye can see, put them in the same direction as the wind, redress the snow? It's going to take 4 hours to do that.
Wow.
So you go, we'll do it. So you turn around, you get ready, and then the wind changes and it comes in the other direction.
Wow. Wow. What a nightmare, man.
All the time. It was a nightmare to shoot.
Mm.
But there's some great things in it, I think.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It sounds like it'd be much more pleasant shooting Miami Vice, something like that in Miami, right on the beaches.
Well, I don't know. I'll ask Michael Mann about that.
Hey, since you spent about 3 months with Stallone shooting the film, is there any like wild or crazy or funny story that you could share specifically with Stallone?
Not really. I mean, yes, but none that I would really share because that wouldn't be fair.
Okay. Okay. Hey, one last question from Filmologic. What would be Jim's advice for young filmmakers?
Oh, wow. Make films. Don't talk about it or just think about it. The great difference between now and when I started out is that, you've got a cell phone. You've got one of these,
Mm-hmm.
and it's got 4K video, stabilized, 3 lenses. It's there in your hand. It's better quality than a 16mm film camera that I would have had to play with. And I would have had to go out and beg somebody to give me short ends, which are the bits that you never shot when someone was professionally making a film. You had to get it developed, cost you money. You had to cut it in a certain way, get the negatives cut. Everything that is impossible to do is in your phone. You can edit it on your phone.
That's crazy.
And it's high quality. So if you've got an idea, you got to just shoot. You've got to make it, and don't talk about it. Just go out and make stuff, because like anything else, the more you do it, the more familiar it comes. It's like if you listen to Ridley Scott talking about his technique. Ridley Scott shoots, I just saw Napoleon 2 nights ago, and there's a sequence in that is just unbelievably well shot. It's a huge battle sequence, the Battle of Austerlitz. And I, as a director, and I think I'm a good director, and I think I can shoot as well as almost anybody.
Mhm.
I couldn't have shot that like that. No
Mhm.
way. He just is so great at what he does, but it's because he's shot so much film.
Sure.
Between, I think, Gladiator and today, so from when Ridley was 64 to now, he's 86 this week.
Oh, wow. He's that old now? Wow.
He shot 17 movies in that period, from when he was in his mid-60s, when most people's careers long gone.
Mm-hmm.
Shot 17 movies. And when he was making the 20-odd movies before that, he was also shooting commercials. He shot 10,000 commercials. So he just knows how to direct and how to marshal a crew. And it's just about doing it. There's a bit of muscle memory in it. So it's good to do it. And now you can. And people can see your work, and you can put it out. You can self-distribute now on YouTube or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And people, I made a 10-minute short film. That got me a career in Hollywood. It's 10 minutes. Everybody can do that if they just get off the backside and do it.
Great advice. And speaking of Ridley Scott and also Clint Eastwood, who are still directing like in that older age and just getting better, because like you said, the more you do something, the better you get. What are your thoughts on Quentin Tarantino? Because I guess he's going to do his last film, which is going to be his 10th film, and he just thinks like, even as a director, once you hit a certain age, like that's it. Like it makes sense to make that argument if you're like an athlete. Like after a certain age, physically, you're just not going to be there. But as a film director, like, what are your thoughts on Tarantino saying that?
Well, I think it's less an age thing for Quentin and more about the way he's looked at it, with an encyclopedic knowledge of cinema that he has. The people that he respects as filmmakers, not always like, the Alfred Hitchcocks of this world or whatever, sort of iconic filmmakers that he likes, so they could be B-movie directors, whatever. That after their 10th film, he feels like there's a sort of the law of diminishing returns starts to play, and the films don't get better. And as I understand it, he wants to go out knowing that he's been at the peak and he's not going to drop off. Now, if you look at a Ridley Scott or, a Martin Scorsese who are in their 80s, or a George Miller with Fury Road, probably the best action film of its ilk, and he was 77 or something when he shot it, George Miller. One has to say there's not a lot of truth in that. John Ford directed something like 100 silent feature films before he made a sound film. And then he made about 80 feature films. So, and some of them were great at the end. Hitchcock, the same thing, dozens and dozens of movies and probably a dozen classics in there each. So I don't think he's right in the way he equates it, but if that's what he feels, then you can only respect that.
Sure.
My gut tells me that after a while, if he does actually hold to that and retire, that he will roll back to make a film, because he's a filmmaker. And it's not a choice that you have. At the end of the day, you've got to go make it and do it. And writing a book isn't the same thing. So if he pulls out of it, I kind of feel like he'll come back. I hope he does.
Yeah, that makes sense. A lot of athletes even do that, like boxers or UFC fighters, they'll retire and then 3 years later they're back in the ring or back in the cage,
Yeah,
right?
but then they get beat down because they're 3 years older and they're not who they were. As you said, it's a very different thing,
Sure. Yeah.
Ali coming back, for the third time after the title, you go, he's not the guy he was. He can't be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they
Speaking of
still have that
Tarantino,
desire. They still have that desire because they're fighters, just like you said, Quentin's a filmmaker. So even if he does retire, I'm pretty sure he'll probably be back.
speaking of Tarantino, I think The Hateful Eight ripped off Detox big time.
Interesting. Yeah, okay. I could kind of see
No,
that.
really, I'm serious. I'm serious. I mean, this whole, this whole paranoia, in the snowy mountains, and you don't know who the killer actually is. I mean, both films kind of riffed on The Thing, of course,
Of
and
course.
in your director's cut, Jeffrey Wright does even. There's a line he says where he's going like, maybe one of us is an alien or something.
Yeah,
like
well,
that.
that was deliberate, and that is a nod, unquestionably, to The Thing, which is a movie I love.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And everybody's inspired by, great films. I mean, obviously Quentin's a prime example. He takes from a lot of stuff, especially from Hong Kong, right?
Sure.
Those action films back in the day. So, but hey, this was great. Appreciate the time, Jim and Sven and Alex. I'm really looking forward to that. We finally get to see the real director's cut of Detox. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, check it out. I'm keen to know how it is. The thing about film, like everything else, you only get one shot at first impression.
Yeah.
So there will absolutely be people out there who prefer the film that they saw first. And that's just the nature of the beast. But I think if you give it a shot, you'll enjoy the film and you'll see how the film was intended to be. It feels much bigger in this version. Again, in the cut that went out, like just about every wide shot was lost. I never understood it to see the location. Anyway, that's just me. Check it out for yourself.
Definitely.
Yes, and
Definitely.
Jim, we're very happy to put out the director's cut, your vision of the film, and thank you for your very kind words towards the release. We're very happy, and yeah, we're just happy that other people get the chance, to see the scope of it all that you envisioned, and I think they will appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
Definitely. And we'll just leave with one last comment from Phil Malavic. He said, "Thank you so much for sharing these stories and valuable insights. Again, appreciate it so much, guys."
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
All right.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for joining, everybody. We're going to cut the stream here.
Cool.
Bye.